Yeah. I will start live in the 30 second. Okay.
Then we ready to share.
Okay, we live.
Okay, and we're live. Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome back to another enlightening episode of iSEAu Project. Our podcast is a getaway to exploring the world of education, and today we have a remarkable guest joining us. I'm your host, Paya, from the One ASEAN team, and I can't wait to dive into the topic that's at the heart of every student's journey: selecting your university or your institution. Now, before we unravel the complexity of this process, let's take a moment to appreciate the importance of the decision that the student have to make, from choosing the university to planning their academic journey. Now, every step shapes their future. So let's prepare to gain insight that will empower both students and educators. Now, before we start, I will share with you the QR code for our Q&A. Right? So here you see the QR code. Kindly, please, if you have any questions for myself or for my speaker right here, please send in your question, and we'll be looking at them later on at the end of this podcast. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's introduce our esteemed guest, Kal Mohan. Now, Kal Mohan is a passionate educational officer at the Ministry of Education in Brunei. He's dedicated to shaping young minds and fostering academic excellence. He is an active youth from iSEAu International Brunei Bersatu, promoting cross-cultural understanding among Southeast Asian nations and Japan. Also, one of the driving forces in Majlis Belia Brunei MBB, empowering Brunei youth for personal growth, leadership, and community service. Um, Kal, please, can you please share a little bit about your background and yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Kal Mohan. Basically, I'm an educator. I teach in secondary school professionally for almost 10 years now. So working under the Ministry of Education in Brunei Darussalam, as I have mentioned. And Pai is actually a junior of mine back in college. So we went to the same college before we did our degrees. And I've been an advocate for literacy numeracy for quite a while, since 2011. So I've been trying to integrate my community outreach program that I've been doing alongside with my passion for education and teaching young kids as well. So in a way that formal education is not just what I'm teaching, but it's what teaching them about life and making choices, making the right choices, and trying to not, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm a role model, but I'm trying to set a good example for them. So yeah, and I'm also, again, as you said, I'm under Brunei Youth Council, or Majlis Belia Brunei. Shout out to my team and my brothers and sisters there, as well as to iSEAu alumni, not just in Brunei Bersatu, as well as our iSEAu from everywhere, even in Japan. So hi guys.
I think just to let the audience know that we're not here in our pajamas. We're actually representing our alumni university. So I'm from Robert Gordon University in Aberdeen, Scotland, and
I'm representing Loughborough University, class of 2012.
We thought it'd be in line with our topic today as we're discussing, how we select university for our future prospect, for our future career. Now, let's move on to our um, first segment, factors influencing decision making. Now, there are a number of factors that influence decision making for students when we're deciding where you want to go for your further studies, for higher education. Now, these factors can play a crucial role in sorry, sometimes, in shaping your choice of university. Now, this could go from university ranking, the major available, your research focus, even location. Again, one of the main things I think we talked about this even in our second podcast, living expenses.
Yes,
financial. It's a big issue. In some sense, English proficiency, the requirements for English proficiency. I think we discussed this in our previous episode, where certain university has different English proficiency requirements, so that may also impact your decision making. Career prospects, scholarship opportunities. So others can even also include your families and friends. Where did your friend go to? Where did your parents go to? So these can actually heavily influence where you would want to go to. So it's fascinating how these various aspects can combine to create a unique path for each student. Speaker, would you like to share your ideas on these different factors?
Okay, coming from an education background, I would say this. Typically, would say like your decision making is based on your performance, like academics. So, which is like if you get good grades or like excellent grades and stuff. But at the end of the day, it's going to be also based on your interest. If you have good results, I mean, like you have the upper hand of getting good offers, getting into good universities, or getting unconditional offers. But in the case of being an average or like not really performing so well, you still have the opportunity to have different types of choices. It may be limited, but at the same time, you also need to consider, as I had said, that there's a lot of things that you need to consider, a lot of components you need to consider, like certain universities, for example, when we were studying in the UK, like back in our time, like O-level GC Cambridge was the in thing of English proficiency test. But nowadays, like IELTS, like you really need to score like a very good band with IELTS as well. So at the same time, when you want to choose university, you need to think of financial elements of your choice, because sometimes, as much as we want to climb higher, like in terms of our dreams and stuff, like it requires financial, like backups or backgrounds as well. So I mean, not some places it's not easy to get grants, some places it's easy to get bursaries and stuff. But at one point, we do hope that, like for me as a Bruneian, I'm thankful that I was offered a scholarship for my tertiary education, so which I did my diploma years all the way to my HND and then eventually to my degree. So I thought at first, when I didn't do well for my A level, I was thinking like, okay, how am I going to navigate myself through, like still trying to get to my dreams? Because my dream was basically to become a teacher, for example. So, and at that point when I was trying to decide was, of course, as a young man, I wish to like study in, in London, like being a Londoner, like being posh and everything. But I realized that it will take a lot of expenses and all those things. So, and it requires me to sacrifice a lot of things in terms of, like access to all things as in fun and entertainment. So I tried to consider myself, okay, if I go to somewhere outside of London, for example, and I could save more money in terms of living expenses, as well as trying, instead of getting into a student accommodation, I usually go for like house renting or house lease, where it's more easy access for you to like share with your mates, your friends, and things that you need to consider as well in terms of yourself. What do you really want to do? Because in terms of decision making, at the end of the day, if you know what you want to do, there's always a way. But if you don't have the prospect of where you want to do in the future, then you're going to be in trouble. Because that's what I said to my students when now, like for example, I'm teaching year 11, right? So they keep on saying like, oh, how do you actually decide like which route we want to actually choose and stuff? I said, you need to think of it this way. At the end of the day, whatever you choose, you're going to be stuck with it, and the accreditation or the papers that you're going to get is what you're going to work with. And it's important for you to also, especially in terms of decision making, to make a lot of research on what you want to do and job marketability that is actually now in trend. Don't go for things, for example, like you want to do fashion studies, for example, and yet it's not really in trend or like it's not really needed now. Because now we are doing Industrial Revolution 4.0, where technology or digital world is more like something that is looked upon.
Yeah.
So for us to be digital literate, it's really important. And I myself, as and I guess a millennial, I mean, I still struggle with technology, but when I see my students trying to do that, I'm trying to navigate them that, in terms of your decision making, like these certain sort of skills that you really need to know how to do it, not just self-esteem, not just, like you can work on yourself, you can work on your self-discovery, but if you don't have enough research, you don't have enough knowledge, and if you don't have enough support is important, especially from your parents, where you need to get blessings from them as well. Because in our culture, like you need to, like get blessings from your parents, because at the end of the day, without their blessings, you're not going to, really have a good life. That's what I think. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I think that's very true. Like, when we sometimes when we're going to higher education, we're so ambitious. Oh, I want to do this. I want to do this, without thinking about the marketability.
Yeah, that's what we were like. We were thinking like,
Exactly.
oh, I want to do, for example, right, I'm doing sports science. So when I came to Brunei, I was thinking like, you know what, I'm gonna do like physiotherapy, and I'm gonna be like like physiology and all those things. And I remember we were doing tourism and stuff. And then we were at a plateau where are we gonna go with this?
Yeah.
So
it wasn't that in demand.
yeah, it was not really in demand, but at certain point during our time, what was important when decision making was making sure that your university is top 50. Remember that? That was the only requirement that we were asked to do. Like whatever course that we wanted to do, it was open for it, because it was the introduction to IR 4.0. But then again, we were stuck for a while where we wanted to. But thankfully for me, like being a scholar student, like as well as you do, like we had the opportunity to actually explore a lot of areas that we want to do in terms of internships as well. So that actually also plays a role in your decision making, because whatever career prospect that you want to do, don't just focus in one area. For example, say you want to be a nurse, right? So you don't just do nursing, for example. You just want to do also, sometimes you can do from biomedical sciences, or you can do like health sciences or sports sciences. So there are a lot of broad programs that you can choose that will give you more diverse choices at the end of the day. So again, it's important that research where you want to go, and also find like a good education consultant that can actually help you navigate.
The idea of having like support. Education consultants are great, and I think it's not just from your host country where you're at, but the university. A lot of university out there that actually have international departments, and some of them are very helpful in helping you navigate your way, transitioning into another country, a different culture. And I think we were lucky. I mean, just to share our experience. So, even though I'm from Robert Gordon, I actually did my degree in Loughborough. So one of the things that became kind of an attraction in Loughborough was the community, the Brunei community that was in Loughborough.
At that time, we had a lot.
We had a big Brunei community, and I think that actually became like a deciding factor, right?
Yeah, because a comfort where when you have your people there, and like, well, I guess it's how it. Yeah, I guess I mean, like, it's just. I think it's just like sometimes when you are with your people, you feel more comfortable. Like
the familiarity.
Yeah, the familiarity as well as a sense of understanding.
Yeah.
And sometimes even when you study abroad, like you do have this lack of sense of belonging when sometimes you are, I mean, for us, we cannot really escape all the prejudice and all these things, all the social challenges that we have. But at the end of the day, it does feel safe to know that you have your own fellow countrymen alongside with you and all those things. So I mean, I was thankful that I had her. So,
I mean, so that's another thing you could actually consider. I mean, a lot of these universities abroad that actually have country university, right?
Yeah.
No, sorry, country. What would you call it? Like community?
Yeah, correct.
So
like a society. Yeah.
So they had a huge Bruneian society. There's different ASEAN society. There's Malaysian, Indonesian. Have a look at this society. These could be also deciding factor, because theoretically moving to another country sounds great.
It's a big decision, and it's also a big move, and not just the idea of moving, the idea of having to to recalibrate your mind into being an open mind and trying to again learn new cultures, accepting, and like you may not agree, but you have to like tolerate and all that.
Exactly.
So there are so many like I guess emotions that you have to also think of. And at the end of the day, you are going to be on your own and have to be independent, you have to be self-reliant, and all these things, you just have to really have a strong, how to say, drive.
Yeah.
Like not just I'm gonna go for this university and that's it. No, you have to think from A to Z, the whole spectrum.
So there's many aspects to it. It's the formal part of choosing the university and also the informal part. Your social circle, the people you're going to surround yourself with, who's there to help you up when you're in this foreign country. The decision-making process is truly very complex training. Now, this leads on for us to the segment 2, which I think you've highlighted earlier, looking at research. Before you decide on which university you want to go to, do research. Now, let's talk about how ASEAN students gather information and how they assess their options when it comes to universities and programs. Obviously, with search engine at the fingertips with Google, with whatever. I like to Google, but with Google at your fingertips. With Google at your fingertips, there are just an abundance of information available that you can gather. But there's a pros and cons, right? Too much information can be overwhelming.
Yeah, for me, I don't like doing a lot of research on using the internet because as you said, like it gets overwhelming, and then at the end of the day, you become indecisive. I'm the type of person like when I have set my mind onto something, okay, that's my path. But if something attracts me along the way, I'll get really distracted and it kind of impair me on like, oh no, I have to decide this again and all those things. So sometimes, yeah, as you said, like regardless if like everything is at the fingertips, you just sometimes need. I prefer to have human interactions. That's why, like, thankfully, at that time, I was more thankful having a good education consultant. I'm not sure if they're still around, James Hahn. So I just want to have a shout out. Thank you for helping me, like giving me the backbone to going to Loughborough College and University as well, and the charity services that we have as well, and back here. But yeah, and I would say when you talk about information gathering and stuff, typically in high school we do have a student council where there is also a career teacher as well that can actually guide you to which sort of tertiary education that you can pursue. Like back in our time, it's more likely from A levels straight away to degree. But nowadays, for us in school, like we give them a lot of platform, for example, around where you can choose for A levels or around which they can choose vocational or technical. So with that, it gives a bit more fair ground to those two routes because again, back in our time, our parents are more into like lawyers, doctors, and engineers. Now it's a lot more trending now. So even influencer is a career as well.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't deny it, but I mean honestly, I wouldn't want my students to go for that. I would rather have a stable like career. But yeah, and again, having a good rapport with people that have access to education information will actually lead you to actually a lot of insights. And recently I tried an OMI TV, like a platform where I talk about things and stuff. And I found out like there are a lot of people actually youth talking about education. And so I did share some stuff and how they're actually fascinated by how much we have become a competitive country in terms of getting scholarship, getting into good universities, and not just studying in Brunei or in the States or in the UK, but in other countries as well. So we're trying to pan out our abilities, our capacity as well. So that is something that is good to see, and knowing that we have more education consultant coming up in our country, in the market. So it gives us better prospect in terms of which to approach, where to go to, and then the access to actually having all these insights. Because again, as you said, information gathering might be abundant, but sometimes when you are stuck with that information, you just don't know everything. That's when you need these kind of people to actually help.
Yeah. I mean, that's very true. I mean, it's great that we have the internet. It's great that we have this, information at our fingertips, which is Google top university, where could I do a degree in such and such topic? But we have to be mindful, how can we get more information on this? It's possible. I mean, another thing that a lot of university does is they have a huge alumni network, right?
Yes.
And you could talk to the alumni and then just ask them, what are your thoughts? How was your experience when you did this course? Another thing is not so popular these days. It's actually looking at relevant websites. There are certain websites that does ranking, like the times that
The
university
times,
ranking.
even now UCAS is doing as well.
Yes.
So UCAS is an old school, like the OG people would know this. Like when you want to apply to university, you go to UCAS, you have your first option, second option, third option. So remember guys, when you want to go on decision making, it doesn't necessarily have to be just one decision, you know. You can have choices as well. So for example, if you want to study in the UK, you have three choices. So you have top three university that you want to choose, and you know, all those things actually play a part in also like information gathering as well. So yeah.
I mean, yeah, definitely. I think it's good. So consider all the things, not just talking to people, but looking at the relevant information, looking at a ranking that you could find online, even the university's website itself.
What I like is education fair.
Yes.
Attending education fair, like a lot of my students think like this is just an outing, you know, like I want to go to Starbucks, I want to coffee beans. So like, no, education fair is really, really crucial. You know why? That is where you actually get enticed with a lot of things, or like those temptations to, you know what, I'm going to study here, I'm going to study at this university, for example. Because my time, my joy was to collect a lot of brochures and like all this information for me. I'll bring them back home and talk to my mom, and like I said, you know what, mom, look at this one, look at, and then like, you know, like she'll just like, for example, like challenge things about, oh, do you think you can get into that uni that's quite high, like in terms of target points and all these things. And it does give me more motivation in terms of drive to actually, you know, having a lot of choices. Bear in mind, like in our time, we don't really have a lot of internet access.
Yeah.
So hoping for education fair and exhibition was our access to, you know, learning. But nowadays, you can even do virtual exhibition. So think of it now, you have more upper hand on a lot of choices and a lot of opportunities.
I feel, you know what, you just keep saying like back in our days, we're not that old.
We do. We graduated 11 years ago.
We're not that old. No, back in our days, we didn't have internet. It was just not that popular.
Yeah, exactly.
People still prefer like the face-to-face thing. So yes. So yeah, it's all about getting the right tools. It's all about looking at the right guidance. And in order to have looking at a solid support system would make a difference. Like you said, you have James Han to help you with your decision making, trying to look at the different options.
Right.
So a support system is very much vital in this area. Moving on for segment 3, how should we address this challenge? Now, students face a lot of challenges during the application process at university. Deadline, personal statement, your CV. Some also request help. Nowadays, they even ask for videos, right?
Yeah. It's more like introductory videos to yourself. I mean, like, I guess when you want to say about challenges, I guess I can I say just overnight.
Yeah.
For our students locally, their problem is writing good personal statement. The reason why they have problem with personal statement is because one, I would believe that because of lack of exposure, lack of self-confidence. I mean, like all this time, usually my students will always have a problem, like how do we actually sell ourselves, you know, in a way that to market ourselves, like be more convincing that we are the right candidate for all these things. So the challenge is not just the writing part, to be more convincing. Because as I said to them, I said, if you don't believe in yourself and what you want to do, there's no point in you trying to put it on paper and then thinking like, oh, this is something, you know, something is going to be fruitful at the end of the day. It's not, because the whole point about having these challenges is that not just attending for, as you said, interviews, for example, that's going to be also a challenge, because if you don't know how to communicate, then that's going to be a problem. It goes back to English proficiency. So like for our I would say our time, during our era. So basically what we did was we had to set up for two types of interviews. One is using our English and one is using our local language, right, Malay. So what happened was that is where our English proficiency actually become a marketing tool, like how we sell ourselves. And as you said, like nowadays they prefer to have videos, presentation and all those things. But when we did that, it was also something like very
new.
It was very, and it was very scary for us as well, because we never thought of like sitting in front of like 8 panels of people and then like, you know, trying to decide whether you are going to be, you know, like eligible for this and that. And that is a challenge as well, to face your fears, I guess. Like in general, just make sure that when you want to address this challenge, it's like in for yourself, think of how are you going to go around it?
Yeah.
Because sometimes there's no way in solving things because you just have to go around it. And for me, my fear was like at the time was I don't like to fail on things.
You still don't.
Yeah, I mean, I still don't. Like, I have this sort of personal standards that I like to attain to, and when I don't, it becomes something that really it worries me throughout the day or like throughout the time. So you have to keep on, example, like keep on self-check, self-progress, and all those things. So it's important for you to do that. Yeah.
I think, when we talk about, personal statement, preparing your CV, again, there's so many tools out there to help you do that. Even university, right? Universities now, they give you
Yes.
guidelines on how to do
Even in
personal
schools, like
statement.
for
Yeah.
example, in our local schools, like we do have a workshop where students are invited to join in to writing CVs and not as well as personal statements because like uh, for foreign students, when you use UCAS, for example, you have to do personal statement. For Bruneian students, when you have to go for HECAS, they also have to do personal statement and such. So what happened is they do have certain agencies will come to school, not just those HRDs or like education consultant, but sometimes like the NGOs that I belong to, for example, like the Brunei Youth Council. So they come to school to promote, like for example, collaborative teamwork or like something or CV writing
Yeah.
as well as personal statement writing and all those things. So it actually helps a lot for students nowadays, and it's more the accessibility is more out there. Like there it's within reach, so it shouldn't be a problem for students to just tap into as long as you really want your future to be clear and you have to invest in all these things.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, when we talk about being preparing for an interview, you don't have to go to pay for a course. You practice,
True.
practice with your friends, practice with your family, practice with your teachers. Ask them feedback tips. What should you highlight in your interview? Your posture, things like that. You could actually discuss it as from an
Yeah, I remember I had to like say it in front of my mom and like like pretending like she's like the interviewer and the interviewee and then like she'll give me like those kind of things. So it in a way it did prepare me for such things or such situations because you can't expect going into the boardroom, for example, going for an interview. Like, you cannot expect like it's going to be a question. Like, sometimes they just throw you in the gutter like yeah, like giving you the worst question of all things. Or like sometimes, for example, like current situations, like like sometimes we don't really read the news, for example, and then suddenly they ask you like, what do you think of this, and this, and then that's where you get caught off guard, and it shows how either well prepared or ill prepared you are. So again, it's also part of the challenges that you have, and that feeling of being ready. So it's not about like fight or flight. It's more like it's either you go for it or you're just gonna be like sit there and cry.
Exactly. So we have to address the challenge head on. It's important for a smooth application process. So we can't just shy away from this. We have to face it. We have to have an interview. We have to face that. We have to do a personal statement. We have to face that, right? Face and challenge head on. Now let's move on to our segment 4, strategies to overcome these challenges. Now let's discuss the strategies that students can overcome these challenges that we just discussed. What steps can they take to enhance their application journey? So we've talked about things like practicing, looking at, what do you call it, support system from educational consultant. So what can they do as individuals? As individual students, what can they do to improve themselves, to prepare themselves as they apply for higher education?
I guess this is where like I would integrate where my community outreach program comes in. Like, usually when my students want to improve themselves, I would ask them, so like, why don't you do something to do with the community? Like sometimes it's good to volunteer yourself and then gain more experience because when you are just a teenager, like going in school, you're living in a bubble where you don't know what is going on out there, to be honest. So I usually push my students to join in volunteer work and then join into NGOs that I belong to as well. So sometimes I bring them around just to be able to see the situation nowadays. And so they're able to comprehend. So when we want to talk about overcoming these challenges, I usually push them to join like self-development programs, for example, camping, leadership camping, or like workshops and all these things. And we do have a lot nowadays because we have a lot of NGOs, for example, locally that are doing to help this young youth,
Yeah.
active youth as well. So that is one of the strategy that I would say, like, don't be shy or don't be timid to join in any social gathering.
Yes.
Because I mean the ones that are really productive and positive for yourself, because it really builds your confidence in a way, and in a sense of not just your how you say, your self-worth, but also your purpose. You know, sometimes for me, like when I wanted to think, when I wanted to see on how I want to strategize myself, I said to my students, find your purpose. Your purpose in life is for what? Your purpose as a student is for what? Your purpose as a child is for what? So that's where I realized that, okay, you have to really tap internally on all these things. Like it's just not necessarily like, we know when you want to overcome challenges, it's all about the action. Sometimes it needs some thinking, it needs some reflection, you know, and which we don't really do much because life is too short and like it's moving too fast. That's what they always say. They're like, you know, like, sir, we don't have time to do all these things.
You have to make.
Yeah, as I said, like if you want your education to prosper, if you want your education to be fruitful, at the end of the day, if you want to have a good decision, if you want to have a good access, then you really have to invest in it. And of course, you have to sacrifice your time. Because it's not about what you just want to do. Sometimes it's what you have to do, what you need to do as well. So having to focus on yourself as a main strategy, that will be a great thing to do. At the same time as well, again, ensuring that you are getting access to the right people, as in like the right information, the right channel, and not just relying on one, get second opinions and all these things. So there's always ways and strategies that actually these things can help. It's a matter of either you want to go for it, you want to find it, and you make time to do it.
I think it's excellent strategy. Thinking outside the box. Don't just think I have to improve my interview, I have to improve my personal statement. Think about how you want to develop yourself as an individual, and that could help you give you a more competitive advantage when you're applying for university.
Because again, one thing to add on, like remember, like we're living in an era where competition is really fierce. Like you think like you are the smartest person just because you're number one in your school. Then when you go for an interview, you realize that, oh no, I'm like number two from the bottom. You know, for example, I've been there, so I realized that competition is getting fierce, and that requirements to get into university is getting higher. So you cannot rely on the minimum. Again, I would say, regardless, whatever institution is offering you at a minimum level, never rest on that minimum entry, because at the end of the day, for example, if there are two people who got two O levels, for example, say two O levels, so like A and B. So this person got two C's, which is the minimum requirement here, for example, to do this course. And then this person got two O levels, but B's and B's. For sure, the B's and B's will have an upper hand to getting into that course. And when you realize that, you thought, oh, I thought I've done enough to get into it. Yeah, enough is not something that you want to rely on. Like you have to really look onto like what is more than that. So that's why I always tell my students, never ask what's the minimum requirement.
Yes.
Always go for the extra mile, because do as much as you can, do as many as you can. Because again, sometimes results speak for itself, sometimes your interest, sometimes your, you know, like your self-performance in general.
That's excellent strategy. Thank you so much for sharing. What a fantastic conversation it has been. We've delved into different factors that shapes this discussion, discussed information gathering, even looked at challenging how we can tackle the challenge head on. It's clear that having a supportive environment helps in this issue. Now let's go to our Q&A session. If you have yet to submit an inquiry, please scan the QR code on the screen and send in your question to our speaker.
Or you can also ask the moderator.
Fantastic. We've got a number of questions. Let's go to our first one. Would you like to read through the first one?
Does the prestige of a higher education institution matter in choosing a university? It would be great if there's such, you know, like higher education that has a prestige, because at the end of the day, who would want to go to top university, right? But to me, after going through whatever universities that I have made my choices onto, anywhere, if it's a good education, it's a good uni, it will give you a good quality, you know, quality results. So it doesn't really matter. But again, if you find prestige on in a higher education institution, then like good for you.
Yeah.
But for me, like for example, I choose based on not prestige, but I choose on based on the excellence of that school. Because in university there are different schools. For example, I belong to the sports and health sciences school, for example. So I go for that performance, that level, not in terms of prestige, just because for it. Like I don't want to say a name of a university, but for example, like say,
Ivy League school.
yeah, like let's just say for example, if you go to Hogwarts, that's the most prestigious school you could ever go to. Like who would want to go there? But the thing is,
Okay.
it will not really cater to my needs as a sports science student, right? So I will be based on other things also. Don't just rely on that. Take into other factors into account as well. Yeah.
I think one of the things we have to consider is when we talk about prestige, I'm assuming we're talking prestige as in Ivy League, right? You're top there, Oxford,
The top
Cambridge,
tier,
Harvard.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it all depends on your career path. I mean, if you think because I think different regions throughout ASEAN has this different thought process. Like in certain areas, where you go to, it's still like a big selling point. Oh, you were from this university, it's a big selling point. I think here in Brunei, it's not so. It's more on your background, right? What you've taken,
Yeah,
the course that
exactly.
you've taken. So it's not really here specifically. It's not really the name of the university, but it's the fact that you got your degree and what you've learned from that. So, but then if you think your region does kind of support or kind of just prefer, Ivy League school, then yes, maybe this could be a big factor in your decision making.
I think that answers question number 3. How important is university? Right? I think
Yeah.
it depends on your region because sometimes, again, when you go to Ivy League, of course, you have the advantage of getting better job prospect and but again, it depends on how well you are in terms of wanting to apply for financial aid or potential scholarship as well. So university rank does play a role at a certain point or in general as a big thing. But it doesn't necessarily like will give you a better job like like guarantee like like all those things.
Definitely. I mean, if a scholarship is what you're aiming, then definitely your university rank
Good
is
university
the
ranking,
number
yeah.
one thing you look into before you look at anything else. Because, like for example, the scholarship that we applied for, they're very strict, saying like you have to be top 50, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Top 50 uni, or you don't get the scholarship. So if that is one of the criteria, then that should be a priority to get. So it pretty much depends.
Yeah, on the preferences.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes university rank is just in general, but again, as I said, in a university there are different schools, so those different schools as well have their own ranking. So sometimes it's good to dive into extra where if the school that you really wanted to join in is something that you really want to do, then it could be number 45, but in terms of your school, it's number 5.
Yeah.
So that also plays a role in your decision making at the end of the day. Yeah.
I like this question. Would you like to share your personal experience in deciding between the position? I'll let you go first because I want to share my experience too.
Initially I wanted to do physiotherapy. Like for example, at that time I was between engineer as what my mom would wanted me to do, for example, and then back to doing physiotherapy. I was more into human anatomy at the time. So when I wanted to apply for that one, and I remember I was talking to James Hahn, and he said, "Are you going to go for something that is just one streamline, or would you rather choose something that will give you more diverse choices?" And I said, "What do you mean? There's more there's more to physiotherapy than just physiotherapy itself." So that's when I was introduced to, again, with a good education consultant, I was given a good insight on sports science.
Yeah.
Then I thought sports science was, excuse me, physical education. In fact, no, it was the sciences of the sport. So I was actually learning, majority of my background was sports medicine. And then that was my major, and my minor was biomechanics. So when that happened, I was very elated to know that I have more choices. And like, imagine if I were to choose physiotherapy, like I might not have a job that I wanted to do now. Like at least when I realized that, knowing that I have more choices, so I use a broad perspective of what courses that I want to do. Hence, I chose sports science.
I think mine was pretty unique in a sense. This was my personal way of choosing my first when I chose my degree. I think my HND. my HND, my degree. The reason why I picked the place the block in Loughborough was because they didn't have an exam. I actually checked the modules within each university that I wanted to go through, and I found out that Loughborough was assignment based, and that sold me because I hate exams. I'm those people who will do terrible at exams. I can't memorize for the sake of me. I cannot memorize anything.
I guess that was one of the selling points too.
Yeah.
Because I went to Loughborough College, not Loughborough University. I mean, we had
Before
to
that,
exam.
we
Yeah,
went
before
to
that, we
college,
did
yeah.
our diploma level 5. Yeah, it was the selling point was doing assignments.
It was assignment
No
based,
exams,
no
just
exam.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a selling point when I was selecting my university, my college when we were doing our diploma. In my master's, this is more unique actually. In my master's, the deciding factor was timing, the intake. And the reason for this was that I applied for a scholarship, and the decision of that scholarship came out when semester would typically have already started. I think it came out at around October, November,
Yeah.
and semester had already started way in September. And my idea was I didn't want to go into a university missing out a chunk of lessons. So when I did my research, my sole target was looking at universities that started in January. And that's how I came to Robert Gordon because they had a tourism course, tourism hospitality course that started in January. On top of that, their master's was 1 year and a half.
Yeah.
How long was your master's?
I did mine back home here in Brunei because I remember after finishing my degree and I wanted to continue my postgrad. For some reason, 6 years in the UK, I was so exhausted. And I just realized that I just wanted to be around my family and and then I remember I was talking to my mom and like, what do you think of me coming back? At the time I was in the process of wanting to move to Cardiff.
Yeah,
I was supposed to do my postgraduate in Cardiff. Then for some reason, I don't know, at the back of my mind, I felt like I was missing out a lot for that 6 years because I was hardly home because I would rather travel or like stay alongside with them, in Loughborough or in London. So I didn't really spend a lot of time, and then I realized that like my mom was getting older, and like my brothers and my siblings were getting, like as in getting into an adult when they don't have a guide,
Yeah.
and I felt like I really want to get back to my family as well. So I decided to take a rest and I actually did my postgrad
Yeah.
back home.
It was a good fit. I mean, and it's not always bad. I mean, when we talk about university, when we talk about higher education, you don't necessarily have to go out of your country. There are a lot of institutions within our country that's actually partnering with international universities. So you can actually consider them. For example, you don't want
Yeah, then we have more training programs now.
there's
Yeah.
more training programs now. So that's also an option. I think we have one last question. I think it's being pinned. How would you convince your parents that your university is the correct one for you? That's a
I never convinced my mom to do so. Like, you know what I did?
Mm.
I didn't tell my mom that I got a scholarship until a week before I had to leave. So because I knew if I were to tell her like, oh, I'm going to do sports science, she's going to be like, it's either she's going to be disappointed or flabbergasted, like, of all things, you've never done sports.
Yeah.
Like, why did you want to do sports now? Because I just wanted to do something different. I've been so much into academics that it just gets tiring for me. And I want to explore things that 1 involves practicum, 2 involves research, 3 involves fun. So sports science was my thing. And then when she found that, and I mean, it was hard for her to believe until the day I had to do so. So yeah, I didn't really convince her that much. Yeah.
I think I don't know. Maybe this could be maybe from a more of a female side. Like maybe the place may be wrong, or that you need to convince them that it's okay for you to go there. I'm not sure. Maybe. So if that was the case, like if you want to go to this university, and maybe you need to see first why do you need to convince them that it's the correct one for you? Why would they think that it's incorrect? For example, if it's a good university, it has everything that you need in terms of requirement. Why would be the reason that your parents may not allow you to go to this university? Think about that first. So, for example, For on top of my head, I could only think for maybe that university is maybe in a big city, and maybe if you are a female, I know it's like sexist, but as an ASEAN culture, we have to female and male. Like I remember when I went to go to uni, like my parents were like so scared about me going out there.
Exactly.
So I mean, we have to look at it in our ASEAN culture. We're like, there's still that, parents still consider like their daughters is more fragile, more delicate
And
compared
sons
to
too.
compared to sons. And so one of the things you may want to look at is look at the crime rate. Show them, how student friendly it is, how student friendly the area is. Share this information, have a look at these statistics and share it with your
Oh yeah, some
parents.
universities would get awards or like recognition
Yeah.
for being a more welcoming,
Mm,
friendly
exactly.
award or recognition. So it might be something that can actually convince them to let you go for.
Yeah.
And at the same time as well, I would say maybe do a presentation in front of the parents. Like
Point slide.
yeah, like how High School Musical Sharpay Evans did a whole thing about how she wanted to move to New York instead of working for her family. So maybe something like a mood board would help. I mean, like it could be something fun, but ideally, if you want to convince your parents, I think it's better to get them on board from the beginning of you wanting to choose studying abroad
Yeah.
and making a decision and everything. Make sure they're involved along the process
Yeah.
so they actually understand
Why you selected it.
why you are doing this, why you are going for this. Because if you're just gonna like tell them and then not letting them in what you're trying to do, obviously they're not gonna be convinced or like thinking like, oh, maybe he or she just wants to move out of his house and then like have a different life. So I guess yeah, and actually, I would say like a culture in our ASEAN culture, we are always living in the same roof as our parents. Regardless if you're married or not, or like we are going to go back to our parents, and then we're gonna always see our siblings. So having that close knit like environment really plays a role as well.
Yeah.
So having for someone to be separated for a while, it does kind of
So
feel
you need to make sure, get them ready.
yeah,
It's
that
not
the
just you.
security of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
You need to get your family ready that you're going to be leaving them to go abroad. Let's move on to the next
Like
question.
that,
Which
the
one?
next question, like, going back to your answer, how you wanted to get back to your family. How do you think international students can handle homesickness and maintain well-being?
Oh, you got homesick, right?
I
think
got
the first
homesick
few
at what?
weeks
I
you got
remember,
homesick.
yeah, I got homesick at one point. Like I asked my mom to buy me a ticket to go back home for just 5 days, and I actually did go home for a day. I feel so guilty to that. No, that's the important thing when you want to do decision making. Oh, that's the reason why for us Bruneians, we always go for like a place where the Brunei society is quite big, so your sense of belonging and your sense of security feels more less overwhelmed and more secure. So I guess in terms of homesickness, it's nice to live with people that you come from the same country. Like example, eating the same food, or having a good weekend leisure time as well. Because like for us Bruneian at that time in Loughborough, we had 130 people. So we felt like home. Whenever we go in town, it's always another Bruneian, another Bruneian. An example, or sometimes do come to pop into our house for like a good meal and something. Sometimes and it's good to have a gathering as well and just talk about sports. And then sometimes we go for an outing. We went to like Thorpe Park and like we went shopping together. So yeah, so that kind of cures our homesickness. Always go to a place where you know it's going to be more concentrated with the people from your region. If you feel like it's something that you have to do.
I mean, if it's available, then you should.
Yeah, but for me at that time, I was just happy to be outside to learn more and explore more about the world. So yeah, it doesn't really, I mean, at the end of the day, it's based on to where you want to choose the place. Don't feel like, for example, if I'm the Brunei and I choose, say, I'll go to Wolverhampton, and there's nobody there. Of course, I'm going to be so depressed. Right?
You're not. I was in Aberdeen. Not Aberdeen.
Oh yeah, she went to a place where there was like hardly any Bruneians. So what had happened was we had a long distance friendship call almost every single day.
Keep in touch like online, like talk to your
No,
family.
wait, what was the app that we used? Like Skype.
Yeah, we use
Skype, we use
Skype
Skype.
daily. Talk to your family, like
Yeah.
Skype with your family, Zoom with your family. Like the technology is there. I remember we would talk to each other, on Zoom, on Skype, and
Yeah, Skype calls because we don't want
Yeah,
our
daily
partners to
Skype.
actually.
daily Skype calls to your parents, when you feel homesick. So it is that, you don't feel that you're alone. At the same time, check with your university. They usually have counselors.
Yeah, they have an international relations student support, IRSS, so international relations student support. So usually like they will, in a way that they will help you to connect with your other peers from the same region as well. And also when you're in university outside of as a foreign exchange student, the student body will always have a what do you call that, a global day or something, like for example ASEAN week, so where we can dress up in our like cultural costumes, and then like sharing food with our peers along the student union. So I guess getting in touch with the student union itself, the student body itself in that university will actually help you to feel more at ease when it comes to like finding comfort with your own peers.
Exactly. I mean, don't feel that you're not the only one who's out of their comfort zone. A lot of people are, and being with people who are like-minded, feeling the same thing, it helps. It does help because you can relate to each other. Do we have more time for one more question? Okay, so would you one more question?
Hold on, I think one. Hmm. I kind of like that one. In your opinion, how does studying abroad impact personal and professional?
Oh, yeah. I think that's a continuous argument when you're deciding, is it necessarily for me to study abroad to get a good
Exactly,
job?
yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
For personal growth, being outside of the country at the tender age of 18 now, which is, like turning legal. Even turning legal. It does impact me in a way that it forces me to be more not understanding. I have to learn it. I have to embrace it. I have to tolerate it. And then at a certain point as well, it made me realize that I was not as independent as I thought. In my mind, when I was back home, I was like, oh, I'm an independent, like, 18-year-old young guy, like thinking that I can do all these things. And then take the fish out of the pond, put it in the sea. Like I was like, I feel so small, regardless how much I felt at the time. Or like I used to have this character person of being ghetto and thinking like, oh, I'm this other person, and then like I was just a minute little thing in in a community. I used to be blonde, she used to be red. We all now it's not a culture shock thing. At that era, it was the start of K-pop, and then like we thought we would be like be one with the theme. So so yeah, and in terms of professional growth, I guess working with different types of people. Like there's a whole bunch of spectrum of people that not just necessarily like people that like loves to work as well. Like you learn to meet different characters, different individuals, and then you learn how to how do you say that, handle them. Like entertain them, and at the same time, how you see yourself as a foreigner in a country where like competition plays a big role. Sometimes, for example, in our country, Brunei, sometimes we find very, very complacent things. Like whatever we have, we feel more thankful, and that's it. But there, it's always on the move in terms of not just your professional growth, your personal growth, just everything in a daily basis. And then certain things that you just don't realize that that you don't see your growth until you come back to your country. And then when people say, "Oh, you talk differently," or for example, or you think differently now, and one thing I like about studying abroad is it made me realize that I have more and a more receptive mindset now in terms of growth mindset. Because back in the day, for me, like what's white is white, what's black is black. And then being studying abroad in general, it taught me how to see the silver linings.
I mean, with that in mind, we're not saying that studying within your own country, it's not going to give you that advantage. So what you do is, if you feel that you're missing out in this diversity in a sense, right? Diversity experience, get yourself out there. There's so many programs like iSEAu,
and then as well as Genesis, and there's like it's a lot of exchange program under like soft power diplomacy where it's not just cross-cultural, it's also like trying to share your experience as like for me, example, as an educator, when I was joining iSEAu, I went to one of the top Japanese schools like there is in Japan. And I honestly felt embarrassed as a teacher because I thought I was a good teacher, but when I see this sort of teacher going full force with her work and everything, it just challenged me in a way that I want to see professional growth, for example. So yeah, that kind of thing. And again, as I said, like don't think like studying locally is going to be any less different. Like, to be honest with you, I come from both. I studied abroad and I had the opportunity to study locally at University of Brunei Darussalam. And honestly, UBD, I hoping I'm more appreciative now, knowing that I get to experience that and seeing and able to share my experience from outside of country, bringing it in, and then that sort of change of shift in paradigm. So,
Yeah.
something nice.
Definitely. Do we have more time for our Q&A? Okay. I think we have run out of time.
Yeah, pretty much covered most areas. And then,
For those whose question has not been answered, please don't worry. We will compile the question and give it to our speaker, and we will share it whether in our social media and share with
oh no,
you.
maybe we can just make an extended video. So like something. To
Well,
talk
like
about.
we'll do another personal.
Yeah,
in-
person. Yeah, like
yeah,
like
we can do that definitely. We look forward to doing that. And thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming
no
in today.
problem.
Sorry that we go out off tangent. Sometimes we've been friends for so long, and we sometimes go off tangent.
So long. I'll be thinking that we're old now. I guess.
For so long that we go off tangent. We hope that you have gotten the information that you need. We hope that you have had received some fruitful information that you can use in your own kind of search in finding, the right university for you. With that, we would also like to thank our sponsors. Let's just put our sponsors up there. We would also like to thank our sponsors, our media partners for supporting us throughout these iSEAu podcasts. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have a good evening. Please stay tuned to our next episode next week, next Saturday. We'll give you the information on our speaker and on our topic of discussion. With that, see you. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you guys. Bye. Have a
Bye.
good evening.